Late March 2026. The conventional battlefields of the Middle East had reached a terrifying, highly destructive stalemate, forcing the desperate Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps to completely drastically shift their overarching strategic focus. Realizing that directly challenging the absolute, overwhelming kinetic might of the United States Navy in open combat was practically suicidal, the radical commanders in Tehran authorized a highly classified, unprecedented asymmetric operation. The target was no longer a heavily fortified military installation or a massive nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, but rather the absolutely invisible, highly vulnerable, and incredibly critical central nervous system of the entire modern global economy. Deep beneath the dark, crushing, and unforgiving waters of the Arabian Sea and the treacherous Bab el-Mandeb Strait lay a massive, intricate web of fiber-optic submarine communications cables. These fragile underwater lifelines seamlessly carried over 95% of the world's transoceanic digital data, facilitating trillions of dollars in high-frequency financial transactions every single day. To execute this apocalyptic mission, the Iranian Navy deployed a heavily modified, ultra-stealthy Fateh-class diesel-electric submarine, specially equipped with advanced autonomous underwater cutting drones. This completely silent, virtually undetectable maritime predator slipped effortlessly out of its fortified coastal pen under the dense cover of a moonless night, completely evading the initial layers of American satellite surveillance. The objective was mathematically simple but geopolitically devastating: surgically sever the primary data arteries connecting Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, instantly plunging the Western financial markets into absolute, irrecoverable chaos and effectively blinding the digital intelligence gathering capabilities of the Allied coalition. The ultimate invisible war had officially begun in the terrifyingly dark depths of the ocean. The entire global financial system was now unknowingly resting on the absolute edge of a catastrophic, unprecedented digital abyss, waiting for a single blade. Operating in absolute, terrifying silence at a crushing depth of over 600 meters, the Iranian stealth submarine perfectly positioned itself directly above the primary, thickest cluster of international fiber-optic cables. The highly trained, deeply fanatical crew initiated the deployment sequence, releasing two heavily armored, autonomous underwater sabotage drones into the freezing, pitch-black water. These robotic assassins, guided by precise, pre-programmed sonar maps, slowly descended toward the sandy ocean floor where the vulnerable data arteries were completely exposed. Simultaneously, thousands of miles away in the bustling, brightly lit financial districts of New York, London, and Tokyo, the catastrophic impact was felt absolutely instantaneously. High-frequency trading algorithms, which execute millions of complex financial transactions in a fraction of a millisecond, suddenly encountered massive, inexplicable latency spikes and catastrophic data packet losses. Massive panoramic screens on the trading floors violently flashed brilliant red as global stock markets experienced a sudden, inexplicable, and terrifying freefall. Within a matter of agonizing minutes, the world's largest banking institutions were completely digitally severed from their overseas branches, halting the flow of trillions of dollars in international commerce. Secure, heavily encrypted military communication networks connecting the Pentagon to its forward-deployed regional bases in the Middle East suddenly experienced severe, highly disruptive bandwidth throttling, forcing frantic commanders to desperately switch to vulnerable backup satellite links. The rogue Iranian submarine had successfully executed the absolute most devastating, highly sophisticated infrastructure attack in modern history without firing a single conventional explosive weapon. The modern, hyper-connected world was actively bleeding out in the dark. The immediate, highly aggressive response from the United States military apparatus was absolutely unprecedented in its massive scale and terrifying technological sophistication. The Pentagon immediately recognized that this was not merely an isolated act of regional sabotage, but a direct existential attack on the fundamental stability of the entire global economic system. The heavily classified, highly specialized USS Jimmy Carter, a heavily modified Seawolf-class nuclear-powered fast-attack submarine uniquely equipped for deep ocean espionage and seabed warfare, was immediately diverted from its top-secret patrol and ordered to intercept the perpetrators at maximum possible speed. Simultaneously, the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet deployed an entire squadron of cutting-edge, completely unmanned Sea Hunter autonomous surface vessels. These sleek, robotic ghost ships, completely devoid of any human crew, rapidly dispersed across the choppy surface of the Arabian Sea, forming an incredibly dense, overlapping, and highly sensitive acoustic detection net. High above the turbulent ocean, heavily armed P-8A. Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft continuously circled the operational zone, relentlessly dropping hundreds of advanced sonobuoys into the dark water to mathematically triangulate even the slightest mechanical anomaly. The hunt for the elusive, highly lethal Iranian submarine had instantly transformed the heavily congested commercial shipping lanes into the most technologically advanced, incredibly tense anti-submarine warfare environment ever established in the history of naval combat. The American commanders were absolutely determined to relentlessly hunt down the invisible predator, neutralize the immediate pressing threat to the global internet, and forcefully demonstrate that the deep ocean was absolutely no longer a safe sanctuary for rogue state actors. The incredibly tense, deeply psychological cat-and-mouse game playing out beneath the dark ocean waves was a terrifying, high-stakes battle of advanced acoustic physics and sheer, unadulterated human endurance. The Iranian Fateh-class submarine, relying heavily on its incredibly quiet, modern diesel-electric propulsion system and specialized sound-absorbing anechoic hull tiles, desperately attempted to remain absolutely invisible by slowly creeping along the jagged, highly uneven contours of the ocean floor. The Iranian captain skillfully utilized deep thermal layers, dense underwater boundaries of varying water temperatures that naturally and effectively bounce or severely distort active sonar pings, to hide his incredibly vulnerable vessel from the relentlessly searching American armada above. However, the United States Navy possessed a completely overwhelming, highly integrated technological advantage. The incredibly advanced artificial intelligence algorithms operating within the network of unmanned Sea Hunter robotic ships were continuously processing millions of complex acoustic data points per second. They were not merely listening for the obvious loud mechanical sounds of a spinning propeller. They were actively, mathematically searching for the microscopic, practically imperceptible disruptions in the natural ambient background noise of the ocean caused by the physical displacement of water over the Iranian submarine's sleek hull. Suddenly, a highly sensitive American sonobuoy bobbing on the ocean surface detected an incredibly faint, highly rhythmic mechanical anomaly. The distinct, undeniable acoustic signature of a heavily strained electric cooling pump frantically operating deep within the Iranian vessel. The invisible, silent predator had finally made a critical, fatal mistake, and the relentless American hunters instantly, aggressively closed the trap around their target, having successfully, undeniably pinpointed the exact, highly precise location of the heavily armed Iranian submarine. The American naval commanders were faced with an incredibly complex, deeply challenging tactical dilemma. Launching a standard, highly explosive Mark 48 heavyweight torpedo would absolutely, definitively destroy the enemy vessel. But the resulting massive, concussive underwater shockwave would inevitably sever the remaining highly fragile fiber-optic cables lying merely hundreds of feet below, actively completing the very destructive mission the Iranians had originally started. Instead, the United States Navy authorized the immediate deployment of a highly classified, incredibly precise, and completely non-lethal acoustic weapon system. An American MH-60R Seahawk anti-submarine warfare helicopter, hovering menacingly low over the exact target coordinates, precisely dropped a specialized, heavily modified depth charge directly above the hiding submarine. This advanced, highly experimental munition did not detonate with a massive hull-crushing explosion. Instead, it violently released an incredibly powerful, highly concentrated, and utterly deafening continuous acoustic shockwave directly into the water column. The sheer physical intensity of this targeted sonar blast was unimaginably excruciating for the trapped Iranian crew. The focused acoustic energy violently resonated through the submarine's steel hull, causing internal instruments to catastrophically shatter, instantly disorienting the sailors and effectively blinding the vessel's incredibly sensitive passive sonar arrays. The Iranian submarine was instantly completely deafened, severely technologically crippled, and violently shaken by the relentless invisible hammer of American acoustic warfare. Terrified, practically blinded, and desperately gasping for air as critical life support systems began to fail, the Iranian captain had absolutely no choice. With zero remaining tactical options and facing the absolute, undeniable certainty of a suffocating, terrifying death at the bottom of the ocean, the defeated Iranian captain desperately ordered the immediate emergency blowing of the main ballast tanks. The dark, sleek hull of the stealth submarine violently breached the choppy surface of the Arabian Sea, aggressively shedding massive cascades of white water as it finally emerged into the bright, blinding sunlight of the early morning. It was instantly, hopelessly surrounded by the massive, overwhelming, and heavily armed presence of multiple United States Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. Their massive, rapid-fire deck guns aggressively trained directly on the crippled vessel's conning tower. The highly classified, extremely dangerous mission to permanently cripple the modern global economy had ended in absolute, humiliating, and incredibly public defeat for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. As elite, heavily armed American naval boarding teams rapidly secured the surrendered vessel and successfully recovered the highly advanced, unexploded sabotage drones, specialized civilian cable repair ships were already frantically steaming toward the area to urgently restore the severed digital arteries. The immediate, terrifying crisis had been successfully, brilliantly averted. But the absolutely unprecedented, highly sophisticated underwater attack permanently altered the fundamental strategic calculus of modern high-tech global warfare. The United States and its global allies had been violently, abruptly awakened to the terrifying extreme vulnerability of the invisible, deeply buried infrastructure that sustains the entire modern world. The geopolitical message was broadcasted loudly and with absolute crystal clarity. The United States possessed the technology, the will, and the absolute power to ruthlessly defend the global digital domain.